Hello, darlings. I'm sure if you're a Doctor Who fan, you will be well aware that Jodie Whittaker's last episode as the Doctor aired last weekend. I had a few thoughts on the episode itself and Chibnall's run as a whole. It started off as just a few ideas that I figured I could put into a tweet, but then it quite quickly devolved into a 6,000 word essay. So, without further ado, the first female Doctor was a very, very exciting thing for me. I used to run around the playground pretending to be a Time Lord, and I was always the kid who would be the Doctor whenever a group of girls wanted to play Doctor Who. So getting to see a female Time Lord that was taken seriously was just so exciting for me. Of course, that meant I wanted so much for it to be good, and I did defend it a lot at the start. Particularly because there was a lot of unwarranted criticism from people who were just not happy that the Doctor was a woman. However, that did mean I was willing to overlook the flaws in the series, which, looking back, it definitely did have. I would recommend watching Sarah Zed's recent video on sacrificial trash if you want to have a more in-depth look at how diverse media is treated by the internet. So definitely check that out if you've got a chance. So the companions. Having 3 companions is too many. I know they did it a lot back in the classic era, but they were able to stretch stories over sort of 4 to 5 episodes. And I just think as a modern audience, we do really need that time for character development. Ultimately, 3 companions is just too many to focus on, and I don't really feel like any of them grew naturally as characters. The only thing that I can remember about Ryan is that he was dyspraxic. I definitely think we need to be seeing more disabled characters in media, but I just don't think Ryan was a particularly great example. We see him getting frustrated at not being able to ride a bike in the first episode, and I think that is good because, ultimately a lot of disabled characters do get reduced to sort of inspiration porn, and they're not allowed to be frustrated at their situation, so I do think that was a good thing. But it does go from him being unable to ride a bike in the first episode, struggling with ladders in the second episode, and then jumping on a plane at the start of the next season. So yeah, it's definitely cool to be seeing disabled characters, but I think the writers just forgot about his disability after the first season when they'd already got all these representation points. This was a great opportunity for the TARDIS team to be coming up with creative solutions to help Ryan deal with having dyspraxia whilst also having to run away down corridors from aliens. And they obviously never utilised that as a cool concept that they could explore. All we really got was the Doctor sort of being like,
"Gotta be quick now, Ryan. Sorry."
There was also this major issue of sort of setting aside time for character development. The main plot would just stop, and it was sort of like Rattus was going to pop up holding a sign saying, "Time to talk about our feelings," which just, it didn't feel real in any way. Just let the characters have conversations that come up naturally rather than being sort of shoehorned in. So, a really obvious example of a character talking about their feelings, which I do really like, is Martha doing the getting out speech to Ten. So she tells a story about how she had a friend who was in love with a man who never looked twice at her. And it's very, very obvious that she's comparing that situation to how she feels about the Doctor. The subtext is extremely clear. It's barely even subtext. It could be text. All you have to do is change the names around and she's talking about herself. But she is talking how real people talk, talking about one thing, but it's actually about another thing.
So this is me, getting out.
It's a very, very basic dialogue concept. I learnt show don't tell in year 5. And I don't think Chibnall really uses it at all. I think it would have been a much better idea if they'd just had Yaz as the companion. She's the one who ended up getting the most screen time anyway, and if the show had really focused on her character development, have her challenge the Doctor's decisions and stances, maybe really focused in on that idea that she's always wanted to sort of run away, and look at that through the lens of the fact that, she's in this time machine where she can leave for any amount of time and then just come back like she never did. That's a concept that's definitely been explored before. It would be a really easy one to do, and they don't do it. That would have been so much more impactful. Like I say, it's been done before with other companions, and they help drive the plot just as much as the Doctor does, and we are supposed to be experiencing this ridiculous adventure from their, like, theoretically relatable perspective, and it's not there. Particularly for the first season of Chibnall's run, I can only think of one instance where the companion or a companion disagreed with the Doctor, and that's Graham in the finale. But if I do remember correctly, he does, like, quite soon realise that the Doctor was right all along, actually, and he was wrong. It has been a while since I watched the episode, but I'm pretty sure that the Doctor not understanding Graham's need for revenge for the man who resulted in the death of his wife, it's not really, like, explored or criticised that she doesn't really understand that or grasp that concept. For me, a really important part of Doctor Who is companions calling the Doctor out for being a twat. Like, Rose does it pretty soon after she meets him.
So what you're saying is the entire world revolves around you?
And then in more extreme cases, we have, like, Adelaide Brooke.
The Time Lord Victorious is wrong.
Or Donna with the Ragnos.
Doctor! You can stop now!
Or just allowing the companions to have selfish moments. You know, Rose saving her dad in Father's Day, or Amy asking the Doctor what is the point of view when he fails to save Rory the first time. Or Clara throwing away the TARDIS keys in an attempt to make the Doctor save Danny. Like, obviously I'm not saying that Moffat and Russell T Davies are perfect writers, of course they're not. Like, it's very worth mentioning that in all of those examples they are being done for a man. But all of the companions have agency in those moments. Sort of, I guess the Clara one is kind of questionable, but, you know, the Doctor is giving her an outlet for her grief, and there's an interesting complexity still to that scene. But anyway, these are all important story beats that further the plot and the relationship between the Doctor and that companion. Essentially, all of the characters in Chibnall's run are presented as flawless. The Doctor, a very flawed character by their very existence, is never really challenged by the narrative in any meaningful way. The one moment that I thought might go somewhere was in Power of the Doctor, where she tells Yaz to take the gun. It's a fairly dark moment that goes against the Doctor's core philosophies, but it never really gets challenged or, like, even addressed again. The "it's too political" complaint is obviously bullshit. Russell T Davies literally has green aliens take over Downing Street and try to start a nuclear war with the line, "massive weapons of destruction." Or, you know, the Happiness Patrol in the 80s, where they have a very, very Thatcher-esque female leader outlaw unhappiness and running death squads and all of that. I saw an interview with the writer, actually, who did say that although Thatcher was in the back of his mind when he wrote it, ultimately he didn't intend for her to be Thatcher. He was just writing a quote-unquote credible and interesting villain. But ultimately, the performance from Sheila Hancock, it's very clear who that character is supposed to evoke. Doctor Who has always been political. It hasn't always been consistent or done it amazingly well. Check out Sarah Zed's other video on the mess that is Kill the Moon for an exploration of that. But 13's run is just the messiest, politics-wise. I personally enjoyed the episodes Rosa and Demons of the Punjab, and these episodes did at least get in writers of the appropriate backgrounds. And, you know, the message of those episodes is essentially don't be racist / xenophobic, which I certainly can't argue with. There's definitely some arguments to be made with whether the Doctor and pals having to quite literally do nothing in the face of the racism that Rosa is up against is, you know, a good example of an anti-racist stance. But I'd much rather they do that than mess with a very real historical figure and make the Doctor somehow responsible for, like, Rosa Parks' actions. Also, I don't think they needed the villain to be a space racist from the future when there was, like, all the racists you could want to take your pick of in the 1950s. My partner, who's Muslim, his main gripe with demons is the way that Yaz pronounces Nane. But ultimately, any issue with politics in these episodes is mostly more an issue with the dialogue, in the sense that, again, there's just no subtext. I did quickly skip through Demons of the Punjab while I was writing this, and it felt like every single line was sort of, this is what's happening and this is how I feel about it. Also, could have been a great chance to talk about how much of a role British colonialism took part in the historical context of the episode, but I don't really think that is ever critiqued. I absolutely encourage discussions of racism when a character of colour is in the past in Doctor Who. There's that moment in the Shakespeare Code where Martha worries about being carted off as a slave, and the Doctor sort of just dismisses her and says, oh, just walk around, you own the place. From a modern perspective, looking back on that, it's not a great way to deal with her very real concerns. So, there are a couple of comments that she has to deal with. So with schoolboys in Human Nature, and then again with Joan in Family of Blood, and showing how she has to control her reaction around schoolboys, and then gets to demonstrate her knowledge to Joan.
Then the metacarpal bones extending in 3 distinct phalanges, proximal, middle, distal.
Both of these, they acknowledge the bigotry that she's having to face that none of the other companions have had to face before. But ultimately, the Doctor never addresses this. It never comes up for him, and it's not really explored in any further depth other than those comments that are made to her. The Doctor punching that dude after he's a racist towards Bill is absolutely iconic moment. I love it. Particularly when he's just told Bill how important it is to control her anger, and I do think it's a good way of showing how hard it is for people of colour to maintain this calm persona when faced with outright racism. But again, it's hardly an in-depth discussion on the topic at all. Ryan does discuss this exact issue in Rosa, and it is really nice to hear an explicit discussion of racism between him and Yaz. My main issue with this dialogue is it does feel kind of shoehorned in, and Yaz's comment not this police, it feels very #not all cops. She really doesn't need to say that to Ryan when he's talking about a very real issue that he faces in being stopped by the police. I would have maybe been okay with this comment if they had then later explored the idea that Yaz is part of an institutionally racist organisation, but they were never going to do that, were they? But yeah, them talking explicitly about racism isn't a bad thing, and I suppose with what the episode is, frank discussions were always going to happen. I just think it could have been done a bit smoother and more natural and more real people talk about it. Also, I don't really know why Chris Chibnall had to be a co-writer on that episode when I think Mallory Blackman would have done a perfectly good episode by herself. Obviously, I think there are much better people to go to than me for a discussion on what those episodes did well and where they could be improved. And obviously, I think it's really good that we can have these conversations on a family TV show. I just think it could have been done a lot better. Also, there's Kablam, a hot mess that is certainly on par with Kill the Moon, if not a lot worse, because it explicitly states
The systems aren't the problem. How people use and exploit the system, that's the problem.
Which is a very questionable quote when it's quite clearly mirroring the capitalist hellscape of Amazon, where the system is very much part of the problem. Oh, I have also seen people say on Twitter that the Doctor just leaves Dan homeless. 11 bought Amy and Rory a house. I recently saw Kit Robinson's video on Chibnall's Politics, which again, check it out. But it reminded me how much arachnids in the UK is just a shambles of anti-gun, but pro letting a big spider suffocate sentiment. Oh, another incredibly messy political moment was having the Master, portrayed by a South Asian man, join the Nazis and wear a Nazi uniform, which the Doctor then uses against him to get him captured by the Nazis.
You're not exactly their Aryan archetype.
Tiny Teutonic psychic perception filter.
Again, questionable. Like, yes, the Master is a villain, he has to do villain stuff, but joining a very, very real, horrifically racist organization that was responsible for the deaths of millions of people is very different from teaming up with some evil aliens that are fictional. And I have never disliked the Doctor so much as in that moment where she, like, helps the Nazis. And it's not once presented as a bad thing. Anyway, Dewen as the Master has a lot of potential, and I'll look more into the character choices they made with him later on. But making him into that sort of Sim-esque crazy again didn't really feel like the right choice for the character for me, especially when, like, 2 seasons ago we had all that character development with Missy, and then just sort of bringing the Master back as an evil madman again just sort of really cheapens all that growth that she'd had. Another thing that I think cheapens the growth of what came before is them just immediately wiping out the Gallifreyans again. For me, it did feel like they'd explored what it meant to be the last of the Time Lords, and bringing Gallifrey back was a good reason to explore, you know, the Doctor being an outcast and a rebel, kind of like they were in the classic series. But Chibnall just made the decision to wipe out the Time Lords again. And I'm like, well, why now should I care about that, like, iconic moment in the 50th where all 13 Doctors work together to make sure that Gallifrey stands? I think I cried watching that at 14. With the Timeless Child stuff, like, I'm not too fussed about them adding pre-Hartnell incarnations. Like, the Morbius Doctors have been there since the 70s, and I think Joe Martin's really good casting. And, you know, Doctor Who continuity is just a hot mess anyway, so, like, who cares? For me, like, the idea of destiny or being special because of what you were born just doesn't resonate in the same way of being special because of what you do does. Okay, back to the power of the Doctor. Plot-wise, it's a bit of a mess. You know, a lot like Flux was, and to be honest, you know, a lot like Moffat's run was as well, but I did feel like there was at least some semblance of an arc and resolution with both plot and character in seasons 5 to 10. But, you know, character does always come before plot for me, and I did think there were, like, things to enjoy in Power of the Doctor. So, honestly, my favourite moment of the episode was where there were no words and Mandip and Jodie were just allowed to act without the interruption of clumsy dialogue. And I loved that moment with Yaz carrying the Doctor to the TARDIS, but I feel like it would have held so much more weight if they'd actually, you know, explored their relationship over the last 3 seasons rather than just the last few episodes. The Thasman stuff was quite clearly an afterthought by the writers who had just noticed that the fans were shipping it. And, like, while it was cool to see, like, an LGBT ship recognised canonically, it didn't really get any time to develop, having only been introduced, like, 2-3 episodes ago. And it isn't even explicitly acknowledged in this episode. Interestingly enough, a regeneration episode which was going to have a higher viewership than a normal episode would, so... Of course, I'm perfectly okay with the idea of subtext, like, this run was severely lacking in any subtext. But, like, even a one-sided kiss on Yaz's part, like, just give me that, just give me some gay stuff, please. Of course, because I am a Doctor Who fan, I love nostalgia bait. Whenever past Doctors or companions are acknowledged, like, I love it, and I think it was done fairly well in this episode. As a side note, it is interesting, because I do very much remember Chibnall being like, nope, this is a new series, we're only going to have new stuff, I want it to be completely accessible to a new audience, and then, like, by all the festive specials, he was bringing back Daleks in every single one. But anyway, it was lovely to see the classic Doctors as that manifestation of consciousness, and obviously I have no issue with them being much older now, because I think de-aging would just, like, take away from the actors' performances. And you can very easily explain it away with the holograms just, like, appearing as if they'd aged with the companions, and I think, you know, that's a lovely idea. The idea of a companion support group, like, I love it. Of course they would all just get together and chat shit about the Doctor. So yeah, I think bringing back past characters actually made the episode a lot better for me. I know that when I look back on the episode, those are the bits that I'm going to remember. I mean, I would definitely say that it is nostalgia bait, and there have been a lot of conversations about that and, you know, how it's used to capitalize off people's good memories of the things that came before rather than making the new thing, like, actually good. Obviously, for an example, see any of Disney's terrible live-action remakes. I will never forgive them for what they did to The Lion King. However, I feel like Doctor Who always gets a pass. It's a very self-referential programme with an incredibly vast history that it's always fun to look back on. I would say it's done badly when they keep bringing back the Daleks and not actually bringing anything new to them, and like I don't think they've really done a good job since World Enough and Time with the Cybermen. Like they have such a great potential for body horror and psychological horror, and Chibnall wrote the Cyberwoman episode of Torchwood, so why am I expecting anything good to have been done there? And you know, I do enjoy the design of the lone Cyberman who was apparently killed and then cloned by the Master to be brought back, which, sure, whatever. Of course, the episode suffered from the same, like, over-explanatory dialogue that all of Chibnall's run has. I'm absolutely fine with the Doctor talking to themselves for exposition reasons, because it is an established part of their character. But, like, when Yaz is talking to herself about why the Daleks doing something evil is bad, like, it's bad writing. You can do that moment with just a look, like, it's called letting your actor act. This type of dialogue basically tells the audience that the writer thinks you're stupid. I can perfectly understand why the Daleks all being around a big drill in a volcano is a bad thing, because I understand context. Also, I'm still not sure really what was happening with the volcano stuff. Like, it just seemed like a load of plot points all crammed into too little time, even though, you know, it was a feature-length episode at an hour and a half, and my brother did a good tweet that sums it all up, actually. Going back to the Master, like, I really enjoy Doan in the other stuff I've seen him in. I love him as Boris Hussein in An Adventure in Space and Time, and I do really enjoy his character in The Great. And like I say, I think he really has a lot of potential. I just don't think he was allowed to really make the character his own. So the introduction we get with him as, oh, I think is really nice, but then as soon as the reveal is done and he makes that flip to being the Master, it just really loses something for me. Also, having the first evil thing he does be putting a bomb on a plane doesn't seem like an amazing choice. But yes, I think Darwin as an actor is really great at playing these softer characters, and when the Master is doing that sort of soft voice, emotionally manipulative kind of thing, I think it works really well. But then as soon as he's doing the sort of manic madness, I just don't think it's as good. Maybe because he's following in the footsteps of some really great performances, and Sim did that kind of madness so well. So I think making the choice to have Darwin's Master's expression of personality be really similar, I think it sells Darwin's performance short. I just think he had so much potential, and he was never really allowed to be his own Master. He was always a sort of almost copy of Sim instead. That being said, I really love the Rara Rasputin moment. And the Doctor amalgamation outfit, I think that's so cool. To be honest, I think the exact same criticisms can be brought about 13. Like, I really love Jodie in Broadchurch, and I think she's amazing in St. Trinian's. But again, I don't think the character was ever really allowed to become just Jodie's version. I don't think the Doctor really had that depth of character that we've previously seen, and I do blame the writing for that rather than necessarily Jodie's performance. Like, obviously she's very messy politically, and I just don't think I know what her fears are, what her traumas are. I don't really see how she grows at all as a character. I mean, I think there's some elements that, like, if I was going to interpret the character, I would say she's someone who struggles, like, expressing her emotions genuinely and vulnerably. I think she's someone with an almost toxic positivity to her, and again, I think that could have been a really great way of causing conflict within the TARDIS team. Like, maybe they have to, like, literally drag her down, bring her back, and be like, face the things that you've done that have happened to all the people around us, that have happened to us. But they never really go anywhere with it. I think there are threads, and there's definitely potential with her character. I just don't think it's ever explored or ever taken anywhere. I think, you know, a really great addition to the series would have been like a character study episode like Capaldi got with Heaven Sent. So looking back at some of the past Doctor's arcs, and I'm just going to sort of gloss over them, just mention a few things that happened. Don't think that I'm saying that this is all there is to any of these Doctors. With Eccleston's Doctor, we're seeing him right after the Time War, clearly very affected by it, and he goes from literally telling a Dalek to kill itself to that gorgeous line,
"Coward. Any day."
Where he refuses to kill all the Daleks even though they murdered his people. Though it is interesting in that series that Rose goes the opposite way. She starts by not letting the Doctor kill that one lone Dalek and then murders the entire Dalek race because the Doctor is in danger. I mean, that is like a concept that is explored quite a lot in New Who, the idea of the Doctor making companions much more dangerous people. And again, it's a concept I really enjoy. Tennant's Doctor is this very romanticised figure, and he's ultimately very dangerous. There's this recurring theme of him losing people, and it's due to his own actions, or of what he made those people into. And then we get this whole arc in Waters of Mars that takes him to this ridiculously dark place where he fights against the laws of time itself just because he is scared of losing people again. And then we get Adelaide laying into him, telling him off, and then that results in her killing herself. It's a really good episode. Like, I didn't really understand that episode as a kid, but looking back and watching it as an adult, like, I understand how terrifying it is. Not just the Time Lord Victoria's stuff, but it's such a classic, like, isolated team all gets killed off one by one horror situation, and I really, really like it. But yeah, Tennant gets taken to this quite dark place, and through wanting to save people, actually becomes very, very selfish. But then he does regenerate in an act of self-sacrifice for the lovely, lovely Wilf. And to be honest, I would absolutely get in a radiation-filled box for Wilf. I love him. Then we have 11, who gives off this aura of very childlike playfulness, but Matt Smith really does bring like an age to him if you look deeper down. And I didn't really like his relationship with Amy when I was 11 years old, but now I think I read Amy as like someone with a lot of childhood trauma who's very clearly neurodivergent. Not that I think that was Moffat's intention in any way, but, you know, death of the author and all that. And then she has this arc of not putting her complete faith in the Doctor, and he has this arc of not allowing her to look up to him as this mysterious, perfect figure. Because that's something that the Doctor really, really likes. He likes being the cleverest, smartest person in the room, and sometimes he just really needs to be put in his place. 11's relationship with Clara was kind of creepy though, and I don't really enjoy it.
Mystery wrapped in an enigma squeezed into a skirt that's just a little bit too tight.
But yes, Smith's Doctor is somebody who like can't stay in one place for more than 5 minutes. He cheats death again and again repeatedly, but then eventually he stays in one place, protecting one town, and accepts that his time is up. Obviously it isn't. Also, with the Timeless Child stuff, like, did they actually restrict him to 12 regenerations, or did they just sort of tell him that and then pretend to give him another cycle? I kind of like the idea that they just pretended, because I think it's funny, and I think it's something the Time Lords would do. And then there's 12. I love Capaldi. I think he brings something new to the character, and honestly, I really like him being a grumpy old man. Like remember when the first Doctor couldn't remember Ian's name, or tried to kill that caveman with a rock? Bring some of that back, you know? I much prefer 12 than 11 with Clara, and I think their relationship's much more interesting when she's not just some mystery to be solved. But 12 does have that sort of like, am I a good man arc, which it could have been done clearer and better, but he does have a lot of really good speeches towards the end of his run about choosing the right thing. Like that one to Missy and the Master in The Doctor Falls is just a really, really gorgeous, gorgeous speech. And then in his last episode, he does meet the very first incarnation of himself. Again, with the Timeless Child stuff, I guess, sort of, not really, but never mind. He meets the first incarnation of himself, and he does realise how far he's come. That episode could definitely use some work, and H. Bomber Guy does have a really good breakdown of it, if you want to go check that out. But his final speech to the next Doctor does end with a "be kind," and I think that was maybe taken as some inspiration to 13, but again, they don't really take it anywhere. So it's worth noting that most of these arcs for the Doctor are driven by the companions, and that sort of lack of conflict between 13 and her companions meant that we never really got that. We never really got it driven anywhere. So I guess the main conflict for 13 after the Timeless Child stuff is that she doesn't really know who she is anymore. And I saw someone say that the resolution to that arc is that she realises that she is loved, and you know, I really like that. I think it's a really nice sentiment, and if you want to read it like that, absolutely. But if that is what they were going for, I don't think they really wrote it in an idea that cemented that idea for me. Now, I know that with 13 being the first female Doctor, she was always going to be met with criticism. Like, I absolutely acknowledge that. However, well, I am glad she isn't just a curse of fatal death-esque, ooh, I've got boobs, doctor. I do sort of think they maybe went too far the other way and sort of refused to really explore gender. Having the doctor literally go from a man to a woman would have been a really, really great way to explore like gender fluidity, gender identity. Ultimately, like, I don't think it would have been done very well under Chibnall, but it still could have been a really good opportunity to get a trans writer on board and they could really bring a personal perspective to the character. I do think at the very least they could have, subtly explored gender roles a little bit. I think it would have been cool maybe if her arc had been about, like, maybe she overcompensates for a gender at the start and starts leaning on really masculine traits, and then as the story progresses she does become more vulnerable and more emotional. I think that would have been something nice to see, possibly. I think maybe to some degree they were scared of making her too vulnerable. Like, while she is very loving around her TARDIS crew, which, I like, but I don't really think it's earned. She's never really like genuinely vulnerable around any of them at all. She definitely does get a couple of moments with Yaz, and like I said, I like that moment they have before she regenerates. And then she does have that really weird one with Graham about the cancer stuff. But it never really gets taken anywhere again. I would have really liked to see a more emotionally open side of the Doctor, especially after we see her struggle so much with Graham. Like, if we'd seen that development, it could have been something really cool. Like, if we'd seen her start off very self-centered and then she'd come to rely on the companions, then that moment where Yaz is carrying her back to the TARDIS would have been way more impactful, and that shot just would have meant so much more. And, I guess she does say to Yaz that she's loved being with her and all of that, but I don't think she really gets any moments that feel like genuine and truthful to me. Also, I just feel like, again, the narrative presents her as flawless. Throughout the entirety of the first season, it just feels like everyone around her is going like, oh, Doctor, you're so great, you're so smart, Doctor. And it's the same the other way around, and she's talking about how great everyone else is, but we're never really shown any reason why we should actually believe her on that. And just, it's boring. It's really boring. I don't know if that ended up happening because they were scared of, like, the first female Doctor being bad representation or whatever. If you still think that strong female character means woman who does action hero stuff rather than character who is well written with flaws and goals and dreams and also happens to be a woman, then, like, go write a 2000s action movie. So, whilst I do think Doctor Who has definitely in the past made the mistake of not questioning the Doctor's more questionable actions,
Small step for man. You should get us all. Fight.
it has always allowed them to go somewhere that's darker. And I just don't think 13 was allowed to explore those places. Like, she does have some moments, but they're never really, again, explored or go anywhere. Or some of the darker things she does aren't presented as dark at all. And yes, I know this isn't just a problem with 13, like this death and the destruction that the Doctor is at least complicit in, like, all the time. But I would have liked some acknowledgement that 13 committed a triple genocide in Flux. Like, at least the War Doctor was conflicted about it. So anyway, I think it's mostly the fault of the writing and the directorial choices that 13 just didn't hit the right spot for me. I just think if they'd workshopped the character a little bit more and written some actual good scripts that had some heart to them, then, the character would have worked a lot better. Doctor Who is a silly show with silly plots. Like, the Doctor's fighting an invisible monster with Van Gogh, but if you're not sobbing at the end of that episode, then what's wrong with you? And of course, there's the last thing. David Tennant coming back. That choice of regeneration location was really beautiful. I had got quite bored of, like, seeing the poor TARDIS get destroyed every single time. And I do think Jodie's last lines as the Doctor, they were fun, they were playful. They did fit what had been established of her character. Do I think they've just brought back Tennant in an attempt to capitalise on people my age who stopped watching quite a while ago, and now, instead of worrying about paying their heating bills, they want to relive a time where they could watch a skinny Scottish dude run away from a silly alien down a corridor? Yes, obviously that is what they're doing. Am I mad about it? not really. Like, the show has lost viewership, and a stunt like this is definitely going to bring people back to it. I'm just mostly hoping it won't eat into any of the attention that should be going to Ncuti Gatwa, because I am really excited to see him as the Doctor. But based on Russell T Davies' recent work, and I would absolutely recommend watching Years and Years or It's a Sin if you haven't, I am tentatively excited to see where he takes the show. I don't think he'll be perfect because no one is, and if you are expecting him to be your saviour and come and fix everything, then just go outside and touch some grass, dear. So yeah, I do think there's going to be some improvement in the show with Russell at the helm, and I do still think there's enough good stuff in 13's run that I can go back and find things to enjoy. And hey, if I do go back and watch it again, maybe I'll change my mind about some of this stuff. Who knows? And if you love the past 3 series, then please, obviously, keep loving it. If you adore all the stuff that I didn't like, then that's great. Keep doing that, okay? I love Doctor Who. It means so much to me, and it is a major part of like the reason I am who I am today. I only really have these criticisms because I want it to be amazing, because I want it to be the best that it can be. And the fact that I care just proves how like impactful the show is. And I really did enjoy Power of the Doctor. Like I enjoyed watching it a lot, even picking apart the stuff that I didn't really like so much. Like, it was still really fun to watch, and it probably is one of my favourites of 13's run. Anyway, this is the first time I've done anything like this, and I might go insane editing it, but we'll see. Anything that I've mentioned or any other articles I think you should check out or videos, I'll pop them in the description below. And please do go and support those creators if you get the chance. Okay. Oh god, my voice is going. Okay, goodbye. I need some water. Bye.